It's me, your girl Jay, the Juju Bay, aka Black Libran Goddess, and I am back with another video where I show this glorious un-makeup wearing face. And this is back with another series where I'm going to be talking about just general stuff in the Let's Talk About, well, not general stuff, spiritual matters in the Let's Talk About series. And this video will be about shadow work. So I know this, I try the hardest to get like the best angle. As you can see, I'm talking forward to you because I finally got my camera up instead of just off to the side. I had to do a lot of work to do that. And I got the sun in the background coming through my window. It's making the room nice and beautiful and bright, but you can't really see my face, so that's okay. Because you don't really need to see my face, you need to hear what I'm going to say. And so you can literally just play this video and look away, because the information is more important than the image. That being said, if any one of y'all have anything to say about my unmade bed back there, first of all, mind your business. Second of all, I didn't feel like making it up just to make a video. Third of all, I'm gonna hop back up in that bitch when this is done. So, you know, it's okay. It's okay. So while we're talking about back to the video, we're talking about shadow work. We're going to be discussing what is a shadow, why it's important, and how to confront / integrate it. And I really wanted to do like a big, deep history thing, talking about, or at least try to do a good summary of like Carl Jung, who came up with the theory of shadow work. I'm trying to explain the best way I can. Like, the shadow exists, but Carl Jung came with he acknowledged the idea that it needs to be confronted and dealt with. But you know, the more I was doing the research for it, from the site that I use, and I will put all this information in the description box so you guys can read for yourself. But I was like, I just want to make a 20-25 minute quick video for just basic information for people who are looking for what it is and what to do and all this kind of stuff. And I didn't want it to be so, I didn't want to go so deep into the history, which is why I'm going to put it in the description box so you guys can read it. I really do think it's important for you guys to read, just because it's important to get in depth, and it may help you guys on your spiritual journey, on your shadow work journey. So let's begin. And I want to start with this quote from Carl Jung that I thought was really important. And it says, how can I be how can I be substantial if I do not cast a shadow? I must have a dark side if I am to be whole. And that is what's really important, the whole part. Because a lot of times we see ourselves and we think that we're incomplete beings, or we're unfinished or whatever, but we are whole beings. And in order to really understand that, we have to embrace the totality of ourselves, not just the parts that are bright and shiny and make us feel good and feel happy. We have to also embrace those other darker aspects of ourselves, or those other unkind aspects of ourselves. And it really is good, it's important, because that part really helps us understand the fullness of ourselves, understand how we engage in certain aspects, how we engage with other people, and how we view other folks. So that's kind of right, the shadow is important. But I took a little notes, so I'm gonna read my notes. And so first thing is, what is the shadow? So the shadow is the hidden or the oppressed aspects of ourselves, and they are usually created in our childhood. And they can sometimes come from traumatic experience, sometimes, but not always. Our shadows are not always just not always like deep, horrible. And I like to use this example, right? Let's say as a kid, right? Let's say you as an adult, you don't really laugh a lot. And that's because as a kid, someone once told you, like, your laugh is too loud, or your laugh is silly or goofy. And they probably didn't really mean anything by it, but when you heard it, you thought this laugh was offensive, this laugh was abrasive. And so maybe so many comments throughout time kept saying something like that. And so you eventually took that to mean, my laugh is bad. So you either started to suppress or stifle or hide your laugh, like behind your hands or something like that. And so that is a shadow. It's not necessarily as deep, dark, horrible thing that happened to you, but it is a thing that incorporates a part of yourself. So our aspects are these parts of ourselves that we hide or we suppress or that we are ashamed of, and they also can be, they could be like, if you have anger issues, for example, that's a shadow, because the reason behind your anger issues and how you deal with your anger issues and how you, project those type of things, all of those comes from the shadow aspects of ourselves. So, and think of your shadow, literally think of it as, if you think that I don't have a shadow, for some reason you might think you don't have a shadow, but everyone has a shadow. Because think of your physical body. Think of when your sun hits you, and your shadow gets cast on the wall, before you, behind you in some way. That shadow cannot exist without you there. So it's literally there. You cannot exist without having a shadow, and your shadow cannot exist without you. You guys are entwined and binding together. Even if there is no light to cast a shadow, that shadow is still there, because that shadow is you, right? And so our shadows are usually parts that we don't see. It could be unconscious and conscious. So unconscious, or I'll say conscious, is parts of stuff that we know, that we acknowledge, right? So that's the part that we actively suppress. So you're like, I know this part of myself, I don't like this part of myself, I don't like that part of myself, I don't like this, that, and the third, so I'm going to shut it down, I'm going to put it in a box, I'm going to lock it away, I'm going to fight it because it's a bad part of myself. That's consciously acknowledging a part of yourself, that's your shadow self, and doing something about it, right? Then you have the unconscious part of yourself, which is, again, let's say, as you said, that smile example, right? By the time you're 30, you've already probably change your smile or change your laugh, or don't do it, but you may not even remember or understand why you've done certain things, because it's at this point, it becomes second nature to you. So that's kind of what our shadow is, and that's kind of how they are formed. But I wrote down this note, said, just because they are dark parts, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are evil or bad. We must divorce ourselves from the idea of good versus bad. And this is something I really learned doing my shadow work. Because sometimes the idea of what is good and what is bad can get warped. And let me use an example. And I'm going to be using examples of all this because it makes a lot of things quicker and better and easier to understand. So, let's say for example, your parents tells you to be a good girl. Right? Be a good girl. And they define good girl as people who don't talk loud, they don't swear, they only wear dresses. Good girls, they don't get tattoos, they don't wear makeup, they don't have sex before marriage, and when they are in marriage, they only have certain types of sex. Good girls do certain things, and they do and behave in certain type of ways. Anyone who doesn't behave this way is a bad girl, right? So you define good in these type of qualities, and these qualities by themselves are neither good or bad, they just are, right? But for you have been defined that this is what good is. So you're saying that swearing, even if it's a language that offends you, and that's allowed, but you're saying that anyone who does swears is automatically bad or evil, which isn't true. You're saying anyone who engages in any type of sex besides the sex that you've been taught are fine, are bad and evil, which also isn't true. Unless we're talking about pedophilia, then y'all can go to hell. You've been taught that anyone who drinks, and we're not talking about big alcoholics either. We're talking about just like, if you have a sip of wine for dinner, or if you drink maybe even caffeine or something, like however you define strong or bad drinks, or whatever, like even from the extremes to the little minuscule, you're automatically define these people who engage in this are bad, right? Because they are bad based to your view of good. But that doesn't necessarily make you a good person, because what if you do all this stuff and you still do harm to yourself and others and to nature, right? Are you automatically good because, well, I didn't curse today, but I harmed my neighbor? I didn't drink today, I don't drink, but I destroyed the earth. I don't curse, I don't say curse, I don't have premarital sex, but I was vicious to animals and children, right? You're like, that framework of what's good is very narrowly defined, and does it really actually equate to goodness? You know what I'm saying? So when we divorce ourselves from this idea of what good and bad is, especially how it relate to certain aspects within ourselves, we're able to really truly freely see and reflect and acknowledge certain aspects of ourselves. I like to think of it less as is this is good or bad, but more, is this helpful to me? Is this beneficial to me? Does this heal me or hurt me? Does this harm me, or does it encourage me, right? I think that's better, because we change your mindset. You start thinking less of good and bad, therefore I'm bad, or therefore I'm good. Because some people like I'm good, but they don't actually engage in quote unquote good behaviors. Again, they do detrimental stuff to themselves and other people, but they think they're good because of certain things that they don't do. And so people think they're bad because again, they're not living up to this certain narrow aspect of what someone had already defined what goodness is. And so any other things that they do are necessarily deemed bad, even though they're not doing anything physically, spiritually, or mentally, or emotionally detrimental to themselves or others. So yeah, I really think it's really important for us to kind of divorce ourselves from this idea of blatantly good and blatantly bad. This is good or bad. This is evil or whatever like that. Because when you start looking at yourself in that lens, that's a lot more stuff to really kind of deal with, because it's kind of harder for you to really focus on the roots of your shadow and where that come from, because you're automatically defining yourself in such a way that you define that everything that you are is this or that. And that's really a process that you have to do. It's not something that's gonna, you're not gonna be like, I watched this video and I'm no longer good and I'm no longer bad and no longer see myself as evil, I'm great. Like the phrase is shadow work, keyword work. So you have to put in the work to do these things. So one of the things that I want to talk about is how to, confront your shadow. And to confront it really just means to acknowledge that it exists. And I'm going to use myself as an example here. So for me, one of my shadows was, so I was doing counseling and therapy to deal with my depression and anxiety. And those were shadows that I dealt with in counseling. And while I was dealing with that, other shadows started to appear. Right? Or rather, I started to acknowledge these other shadows, because again, they were always there because your shadow is a part of you. So while I acknowledged this other part, one of the things I started to acknowledge about myself was that I was a people pleaser. Now, I hated the word people pleaser, because for me, a people pleaser was someone, and I say this example all the time, but this is really important because this is really how I got to this point where I am now. I was a people pleaser, was a weakness, someone who just did everything for everybody, had no sense of self-control, just a weak person who couldn't stand up for themselves. And that was because that was who I was. Because that was a hidden aspect of myself, or an unseen aspect of myself, because that was a shadow. And so when I started confronting that idea, when I started confronting that I'm a people pleaser, when I started acknowledging, being self-aware that I was one, I was able to really, so first step, acknowledging self-awareness. All right, be aware of what you are and be honest about what it is, right? Because that's the key. You can't confront something that you won't admit is there, right? If you have a pain and you say there's nothing, it's not going to make the pain go away. It's still going to be there. So I had to acknowledge that I was a people pleaser, right? So after I did that, I said, okay, so what am I going to do about this? And so I decided I had to discover where the root of that came from. And so since I was already again doing my counseling, my therapy, and understanding a lot of stuff that affected me in my childhood, which brought all these other stuff together, automatically my thought was, hey, go back to childhood. And it was important because again, childhood is where a lot of our shadows are born, right? Because it's our informative years, it's our beginning years, it's how we learn to identify ourselves, where the beginning of our identify ourselves, how we view the world and view our society and view the environment. And that's how we learn. We learn all of that in our home life, however your home life is defined, where you grew up in a 2-parent household, foster care, orphanage, whatever authority figures or whomever was in your life that was supposed to guide and help raise you. That is part of your childhood. That's the people that help build your shadow. So your parents, siblings, grandparents, aunts, uncles, educators, whoever, all of this stuff affected your shadow, affected who you are and how you grow to see yourself and yourself in the world. So for me, I was a child who never felt like I had a place in the world, a place even in my immediate family, and I was a person who felt like I had to sort of prove my worth, right? I'm like, so I was like, if otherwise, like, if I'm not someone who can please everyone, people around me, right? So I had to do something to, to get that good girl from my mom, or try to please my dad, or please my sisters, grandparents, or eventually everybody that came into my life. So it was me basically saying, who do I have to be to get your love? Tell me and I will be that. Even if I saw it wasn't working all the time, I still did it, because at this point it just became second nature to me, right? And plus mix that in with the idea of how to be a good girl. So I couldn't raise my voice, I couldn't, you don't fight, you let the Lord fight your battles, you do all this kind of stuff. And so those kind of things kind of mixed in together. And by the time I, got to a point where it was extremely detrimental to me, when I could acknowledge it detrimental, it had been, I was already in my teenage years by that time. And so even when by the time of teenage years, I realized I can't be people pleasing everybody. That still didn't change the fact that when there are people directly in my life that I did do things to please them. So it was like, I can't lose you as a friend, so I would do whatever you say to be a friend. I would sacrifice my well-being. Like, if I'm tired, I don't care. If you want me to go, I'll do this, I'll do that, blah 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 blah. And so me understanding that, getting to the root of that, was how I understand, okay, this is how I people, this is how I showed up in my life, blah blah. So the next step I had to do was, okay, so now I know what the issue is. 2, now I've gotten to the root. 3rd, how do I deal with this? And my first mistake was forgetting the integration part of your shadow, right? I was like, I've got to destroy this shadow must die. And so I was just like trying the hardest to not do that, to go and do everything else. And I remember I was like lying in bed doing, just thinking in a meditative state. And I was like, why isn't this shadow work thing working? And so part of me was like, baby, you're not supposed to try to destroy the shadow. You're supposed to integrate it within yourself, which means embrace it. And I was like, oh, right. And the reason why you can't really destroy your shadow, because remember, the shadow exists because we've already suppressed some parts of ourselves. So you trying to suppress this part of yourself that you don't like, it's just like the shadow's like, well, you're already doing that. It's like, so what I'm supposed to do, like suppress myself even more? It's not going to work. Integrating ourselves basically means is acknowledging that part of yourself and embracing what it is, right? And you don't have to really like it. I didn't like that I was a people pleaser, but ignoring that I was a people pleaser didn't do anything, because it kept making me do people pleasing shit. And acknowledging it, getting to the root of it, and then be like, and embracing that part, like, okay, I am a people pleaser. And by embracing it, I was able to break down those aspects and get to the main core. And the main core of it was, I like to help people, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually good. And understanding that I like to help people, I also understand that I like to help people, but I don't have to sacrifice myself to help people. I like to help people, but I can set up boundaries and how I engage with people. I like to help people, but I don't have to live in a savior complex, right? I don't have to save people. Don't save us. You don't want to be saved. So understanding that, I was able to get to the main core and ingratiate that core of myself, which is I like to help people. And that actually, honestly, helped me get more into my purpose, which is again why I do these YouTube videos, helping people and help in any small way. If this is just one video of the hundreds you watch about shadow work, that's good. It's just one little small thing that can help you in some type of way. That's all I want. That's all I ask for. I don't ask for anything else. So yeah, so that is how learning how to do that and learn to integrate that part of myself. I was able to really kind of really kind of move on and move forward from that shadow. And then once I started acknowledging that, anytime that shadow started to come up, I was able to see it, recognize, and call it for a word was it was. And honestly, I haven't been in a people pleasing state since. I mean, I had, well, let me just say, I had moments, and those moments where I had to not just people pleasing, but I had to realize that people pleasing also showed up as a savior complex, where now I do have to please people, but I have to save people, because I have to, like, I had this idea that I must help everyone. And you can't help everyone, and mostly because some people don't really want your help, and you can't just go around just telling people you're broken, here's how I can fix you. And that was never my intent, because remember, my intent was to please people. So so I had to, every time it shows up, and that main part is still things I had to learn to deal with. So I'm like, listen, I tell people, if you need me, I'll be here to listen, but that's all I can do. Right? So for me, that's how I did my shadow work. Okay, acknowledging it, being aware and acknowledging that it actually exists, calling the shadow what it is, to getting to the root of what that shadow comes from. 3, integrating that shadow within yourself. And that's just 3 very simple ways to do it. There are a lot of people who have shadow work services that can teach. I also have a shadow work service that I'm going to have down in the description box, where we'll talk for 90 minutes to 120 minutes. I know it seems a lot, but it really is, because what we'll do in there, we'll have a conversation, we'll get to know each other, and we'll talk about what this shadow is, and we'll have a discussion using tarot and oracle cards about what this shadow is, how it shows up in your life, and how to deal with it. And really what it is just a small section, kind of like this video, where you can understand and start working on it. Okay, so now you know that. So what are some other ways that you can deal with your shadow? One of them is, and I say this to everybody because this has been the biggest help forever for me, is journaling. Like literally writing down your those shadow things yourself, all of your thoughts, not just the bad ones, but the good ones too. My journal has it has ancestral prayers, it has tarot spreads, it has blessings, it has my good days, my bad days, my terrible days, my unsure days. It has all of that, and this is a place where I can just accumulate all of this energy that's usually will be stuck in my head. And if I don't have anyone to speak to, or I don't feel like I can properly voice that, I put it in my journal. And you can have, and I suggest to have a journal strictly for shadow work, so you can literally easily move forward and backwards. You can look back and see where you think, how you progress and process a lot of the stuff, a lot of your issues. I also recommend therapy and counseling, especially since, again, like I said, not all of our shadows are traumatic, but for the ones that are and will be, you don't necessarily want to deal with those shadows on your own, because once these old things start coming up and start revealing yourself, it's going to be alive. And it's really important for you to have someone there, especially a professional, who can be there for you and help you. Like, again, I have my shadow service, but I am not a professional. I cannot say that enough. I am not a professional. I am not a licensed therapist or a licensed counselor, and that's not what I'm here to do. I will always, including in my shadow work sessions, give you some information about how you can engage with someone who actually knows how to deal with the different types of traumas that you have, and how to deal with them, and how to help you through them, right? And so that's why I think it's really important while you're doing this work to not just do it on your own. It's also very important to be very honest with yourself. Like, don't be ashamed that you have a shadow. We all have them. Don't be ashamed of your shadow. Don't, again, because you know that shame builds into it. Be honest, be open, be just remember that your goal here is not to add any more burdens to yourself, right? It's to release them. It's to free yourself from them. Free yourself from these old ideas, these old ideologies, the things that have been detrimental. Think of it like you've been really sick, right? You have a pain in your body, and you don't want to deal with it. Like, I can't deal with this pain. This pain is working much. I don't got time for this pain. So you ignore it, but the pain is still there. and it's still aching, it's still hurting, and it's even growing. But you have been so used to it that you've gone to the point where you acknowledge this pain, until one day when it makes you so sick that you're in the hospital where you can't ignore it, right? That's kind of what it is when you want to ignore your shadow, and you kind of like just dismiss it. And when you think that your shadow is just something that can be simply dealt with, as in, if actually just ignore it, or something, I just think I can ignore it, it's fine, it's good, I don't have to worry about it. Don't ignore your shadows. Don't ignore those problems. Don't ignore those issues. Don't add in more shame to it. Like, treat yourself with grace. And I'm going to keep talking about grace whenever people see me, because grace is important. It's important to you be kind to yourself, to be understanding to yourself, even when and after and while you're going through your shadow work. Instead of saying, God, I wish I knew I did this. Like, you can't change the past. And the future is, the future is yet to be determined, but you have right here in the present and the now. And so you can learn from your past mistakes. And instead of saying, I wish I had knew, or I didn't know, or I didn't do this, or blah, 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 or attacking yourself, show some grace. Like, okay, I didn't know this then, but I know it now. And so now I can recognize it, and now I can do what I need to do to embrace this part of myself, and to start moving on and start growing to a fuller person of myself, to see myself in the whole and totality of myself. Right? Just those simple things can change it. Also, when you're doing your journaling, a good thing to do is, when you're writing down, to write down your negative thoughts, your negative traits, and all those things that you believe in yourself. Write a counter to it. So if you're saying, like for me, I just wrote down a whole list of all my negative thoughts about myself. And so I was like, I'm unworthy, I'm broken, I'm unlovable, and all this stuff. And then I wrote, okay, so these are all my negative thoughts. And then I counted them, and I said, I am not broken. And it's not just one word sentences, but I actually really took that thought and broke it down. I'm not broken. Because I have human emotions, and even if my emotions seem to be cumbersome to myself and maybe even to others, that does not mean I am broken. I am lovable. I'm a lovable person, and I have love, and I can give and show it love and embrace it for myself. I have worth simply by the basis of me being a human being here alive. I'm worthy because I have divinity within me, and everyone, so do you, have divinity within us, and the divine is always worthy. You're always worthy. We are worthy human beings. And so having to break those down and having to think those thoughts were a good help, because it was a good way of writing affirmations for myself that I could look and see and challenge these thoughts whenever they come up. I have affirmations on my phone that I have ancestral affirmations that I'm getting from my ancestors and my guides. And even in my journal and in my shadow work journal, I have my affirmations down where I could confront those things, and I pick them up every now and again. I read them when I need to remember, when I need to read them and remind myself of who I am, the bad bitch that I am. Also, a good thing to do, and again, this is a lot of the stuff I got from this website that I am going to put in the description box. And I'm also going to include a PDF that I download from this website, so again, you guys can look into this and you can look deeper into it, and you can start your own shadow work journey. I even have a playlist on my YouTube for shadow work. It only has a few videos in it at the time, but I have a spirituality playlist that I might have some videos in there, because sometimes I get disorganized and I just I'm sticking here and I'll just figure it out later, and then I don't figure it out later. But yeah, those will be really good YouTube videos. And yeah, there's a lot of information on YouTube. There's a lot of journaling prompts that you can use. You can challenge your thoughts by writing down, okay, if this is a belief, how did this thought happen, right? Countering it, like, okay, so what happens if, right? Even if I do laugh loudly, right? What happens? What's the worst that can happen from me laughing loudly? I get some attention, wanted or unwanted. What's the harm in that, right? Laugh loudly, laugh brightly, and you can find, and you'll be amazed how much energy has been saved, have been used to suppress parts of ourselves that should never been suppressed in the first place, that are, again, since there's no good or bad, they're not evil, they're evil parts, and they're not something that needs to be curbed or broken or hidden or what the fuck ever reasons that we have that creates our shadows. So yeah, I think because I'm already at 30 minutes, and that's way more than I wanted to do for this. Again, I wanted to have a short video, so that's just a basic gist of what shadow work is, or what the shadow is, of how to engage in some shadow work, about why it's important, about why we need to start doing this work. And it's also really good. I didn't say this part, but this is something I really want to say. Shadow work is really good because not only does it help in how we view ourselves and it helps in how we view other people. You'll be amazed at how your relationships change once you realize that everyone has a shadow that they're dealing with, and you don't necessarily have to put up with anybody's bullshit. No one has to put up with anybody's shit. Nobody has to put up with your shit. But it is freeing to understand and know, like, okay, so this person is behaving this, that, and way because this is probably a shadow that they dealt with in an unhealed shadow, and that is you can be like, you can adjust your energy as needed. Also, I think it's really good because it helps us stop projecting, and that's something I think I might have mentioned that earlier, but we do a lot more projection than we know, because we have our own insecurities, we have our own issues, and because we don't want to deal with those shadows on ourselves, so we make it other people's problems. So if you have a self-esteem issue, and that could lead to self-harm in typical ways, and actually physically harming yourself, harming your mental and emotional capacity, mental and emotional energy, harming your physical body, harming others. If we have anger issues, we take the anger on people. Or in projection, we may start thinking that other people see us the way that we see us, and that may not be true. If you make a mistake and you think the mistake makes you a failure, and you think the person who saw you make a mistake thinks that you're a failure, and you start talking and acting as if they said that, but the person never said that. They never did that. That's just all on you. And if you confront and understood that shadow, it can change that behavior. So instead of you being like, oh, I made a mistake and I'm terrible, you be like, I made a mistake and mistakes are okay. Mistakes can be fixed, and even they were big mistakes, they can still be handled. No one died from this mistake. It's okay. So yeah, that's basically what I just wanted to say about shadow work. Damn, 32 minutes. Oh my god. I don't know what to say about myself. But yeah, I hope this video helped you guys. I hope it may got you some information, give you a little bit more insight. And before I go, I want you to remember that I love you. God loves you. Remember to tend to your mind, body, and soul. So drink some water, say your prayers, and do your shadow work. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.